Thank you, Alicia. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, welcome to the European Ideas Forum 2025. I believe it will not sound like a cliché if I state at the opening of our conference that the world, and Europe within it, is going through a difficult, if not critical, period of time. This period has been dominated by a Russian brutal aggression against Ukraine, which has gradually evolved into a hybrid war of the Kremlin against Europe. The United States policy since the most recent elections has been a distinctive feature of the present time. It is difficult to understand why the US appears to lean more towards the aggressor than towards the victim. Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger succeeded in shifting China away from Russia. It seems that President Trump is proving more successful in distancing Europe from the United States. The alliance between Russia and China on the one hand and Donald Trump's MAGA movement on the other raises deep concerns among all those who have retained sound judgment and who care about the world and its future. Recently, an American friend of mine, a politician and a very experienced diplomat, said to me, "Mikulas, I see that you still work a great deal and travel extensively. I am the same. We work more than ever before. Yet the development is not for the better, but rather for the worst. We must be doing something wrong. What are we doing wrong?" I will never forget the atmosphere that prevailed in Dublin on May the 1st, 2004, when 10 countries joined the European Union. We were all happy then, Jacques Chirac and Gerhard Schröder, Tony Blair and the Hungarian Prime Minister alike. The US President George Bush congratulated me not only on my country's accession to NATO, but also in its accession to the European Union. Today, 2 decades later, the United Kingdom is no longer among us. The Hungarian Prime Minister and the Slovak Prime Minister maintain friendly relations with Putin, attributing their own failures to Brussels. The Polish Foreign Minister explains in Parliament to the opposition what would happen if Poland left the EU. France is experiencing profound instability. The German society faces serious challenges, and almost all our countries struggle with high levels of debt. I am aware that we have lived through numerous crises since the Big Bang enlargement, crises often described as unprecedented. Yet we should be strong enough and to ask ourselves, what are we doing wrong? What should be changed? To understand what needs to be done today and tomorrow in order to succeed in the global economic competition and ensure peace and stability, security in Europe and beyond, we should be able to formulate critical questions and then to strive for honest, truthful answers to them. We need to explore why populism thrives more than values-based politics, not only in Europe, not only in the United States, but also in some other democracies. Does liberal democracy have any perspective, functional alternative that respects our values? Why is the extreme right gaining more and more seats in the European Parliament, but also in our member states? Is the EU's absorption capacity to take on immigrants unlimited, or that there are some limits? If there are limits, how to maintain them? Are we prepared and able to tighten our belts in the EU so that Ukraine could survive? What is our mid- and long-term strategy toward Russia? What measures do we need to adopt to attain a level of international respect and authority comparable to that of the United States? How should we respond to the new US national security strategy published last week, which prefers cooperation with the EU's particular member states over engagement with the EU as a whole? We all know, or at least sense, that something needs to change, that we need to return to the roots of European unity. Returning to the roots means defending our values and principles, the values of liberal democracy. It is not only freedom, human dignity, solidarity, rule of law, which need to be defended and promoted. It is also courage, fortitude, and resilience that need to be promoted and honored. It seems to me that it is a lack of courage or the fear of public's reaction which prevents leaders from reforms and changes which could make the EU stronger, united, and more respected. Well, politicians serve people. However, it doesn't mean that the leader should resign on changes which are painful, then unpopular. Or to go down to fashionable but not perspective trends promoted by certain media or social network. Returning to the roots means defending Europe's cultural diversity in accordance with principle of subsidiarity. The peoples of Europe have much in common, yet we are also different, from region to region, from country to country. We cherish different traditions, customs, and habits. We have diverse histories. We have matured under different social and political conditions. This unity in diversity must be consistently respected, and attempts of cultural harmonization must be avoided. Such attempts play into the hands of nationalists, separatists, and populists. On the other hand, the lack of courage and fortitude prevents us from being more united in defense and military cooperation and foreign policy area. Again, in accordance with the principle of subsidiarity. We are still clinging to various anachronisms. One example is the approach that equates a national army with state sovereignty, independence, and national identity. Yet Russia's war against Ukraine teaches us that due in part to this persistent anachronism, the EU possesses multiple types of weapons with identical functions that are mutually incompatible and do not allow for interoperability, which is crucial in any military operation. After all, tanks, fighter jets, or drones cannot be symbols of state sovereignty or national identity. These symbols are found in our culture, in our theaters and operas, in our films, literary works, architecture, and in our traditions, customs, and cultural distinctiveness. Dear friends, it is vital that the approach of our work with a critical eye. Such an approach helps us identify not only our weaknesses, which need to be addressed, but also our strengths and achievements, the foundations on which we should build our future. Let's recall how the European community rallied around Greece, helping the country stay afloat and allowing it to keep swimming despite those who wanted to drown it and were calling for its bankruptcy. Today, Greece appears to have regained solid ground. We overcame the COVID-19 pandemic, thanks in large part to effective action of the European Commission, which secured sufficient masks, vaccines, and medicines. The crisis united us to the extent that for the first time in our history, the member states agreed to allow the European Commission to issue joint European bonds to finance the stabilization and recovery effort. We are gradually phasing out of energy dependence on Russia and reducing unnecessary regulation and bureaucracy, although the process remains slow and cumbersome. We have the strength and courage for self-reflection and for seeking necessary solutions, as demonstrated by the report of Enrico Letta and Mario Draghi. Europe is still a good place to live and continues to attract people from other continents. What is most precious, however, is how we have stood together in face of Russia's attack against Ukraine, even though the most demanding challenges still lie ahead. I believe that the outcome of Russian aggression will determine not only the fate of Ukraine, but also the fate of the European Union. It is therefore up to us to overcome the last barriers of mutual distrust within the EU, complete the single market, introduce the common currency in the remaining member states, and, above all, to build a common, united European defense. The EU faces a historic challenge: to assume leadership in providing aid to Ukraine. This imperative becomes clearer with each passing day. Recent days and weeks have shown us that the President of the United States is primarily focused on quick wins. Yet Russia's war against Ukraine cannot be resolved quickly, while also securing a just and sustainable peace. Not least because Russia is a military power, but above all because it has China at its back. We must strive for a lasting alliance with the United States and ensure continued US involvement in international aid to Ukraine. The US has been one of the guarantors of Ukraine's territorial integrity since Ukraine relinquished its nuclear weapons. The US, therefore, carries a strong political and moral obligation towards Ukraine. Yet Europe must become the leader in aiding Ukraine. Dear friends, our conference, the European Ideas Forum, is one of the flagship events of our Martens Center. Its 16th edition aims to provide a platform for free discussion on the most pressing issues affecting the EU citizens and the world. I'd like to thank the sponsors of the event: Qualcomm, Microsoft, AT&T, Apple, and Bristol-Myers Squibb for their support. I believe that by the end of the conference, we will have slightly fewer questions before us and slightly more answers. I wish us all an inspiring experience. Thank you for coming and thank you for joining.